We've been around since 2008 here at the Foothills Country Hospice. And in those very early days, it was very much a volunteer paper sign-in sheet that then the volunteer manager at that time would then take and upload into a spreadsheet. Very, very low technology was used, which creates a lot of its own challenges, obviously. Average about 100 volunteers at a time doing multiple roles, everything from reception and patient support to kitchen support and landscaping to now we have a bereavement program that Allison runs, where we match volunteers with clients in the community for bereavement follow-up phone calls, just volunteer check-ins, how you doing? It's been, X number of months. We're just seeing how you are, which has been an amazing program for us. But you really can't grow and expand your volunteer programs if you're spending all your time navigating scheduling, right? And doing that data entry piece, which was a big piece of it for us, for sure. So I took over this job here in 2017 and found out quite quickly that we had a kind of a technology gap in our program. I found that at that point in time, there wasn't really even a spreadsheet to speak of. So I started going through file by file and creating one, which was okay for a little while. But as you all I'm sure know, that also has its own challenges. A previous volunteer manager had brought in the Track It Forward system for us as a volunteer hours logging system, which was an improvement for sure over what we had been doing. But even then, if I had a volunteer email me and say, oh, I've changed my email, can you please update your records? Well, I had 3 spots to go change that, right? One in Outlook and one in the Track It Forward and one in the file. And it was a lot of double entry on my end. And so there was certainly a big challenge in my time management. Long story short, when she had a client's call back after, they were here last year, she had really no way of going back and finding out what the previous case notes had been, other than digging through binders. Went through the process. I found out right away that we had challenges. I knew we needed something better. I started doing some digging. We were using Track It Forward at the time. It was fine, but it didn't do nearly the things that I was hoping that I needed from my program. In my needs assessment, we have lots of grant funding for our nonprofit, and one of those is very sort of demographic based with this grant that often funds my volunteer program. So one of the big pieces I was looking for in my research was, how do I track those kind of stats where I can just pull that quickly without a lot of headache and stress?
And at the time we were working under a community grant, and we had a budget in place that was about $2,000, which isn't a lot of money to look at in implementing a client tracking system. And so the one that was actually suggested in the budget, when I contacted them, they said, you should just add another 0 to that because it's $20,000 to implement this system. And so Bonnie, who was already using Better Impact for Volunteers, said, well, I think we could look at this for the client side of things. So we met with some people from Better Impact, and I started to tell them what my needs were, and they could tell me whether that was going to fit. And so with some trial and error, we've come to be able to use our systems. We have active clients. We can archive them when we're no longer interacting with them, but the records are all still there. And then when we look at our volunteer program that's specifically around matching volunteers to make phone calls to clients, we can then just go into the system and actually choose that option that Cam was referring to, where we associate the client to the volunteer, and then the volunteer is able to access a limited amount of information in a notes for volunteer section. that they need to be able to make the phone call. So that's really helpful too. And that really alleviated a lot of work in terms of paper sheets that we were giving to volunteers and tracking it in binders and all of that.
The other thing that we really found helpful was the volunteers would come in, everything was paper-based in the binders. The volunteers would come in prior to client impact and would have to make their phone calls from the hospice and then chart their notes on paper in the hospice. But then you have a very limited amount of time you can make these phone calls. And so then that client may not be available in that 1 hour time frame or whatever that looked like. So now with the fact that they can do this remotely, they can do it from home. They can go into a private space at home and use their own, but we have hospice phones we give them now, but they can make their phone calls when it works best for them and the client. It really was important for us to have a better system in place so that we weren't spending all of this time backtracking and figuring out what we had done last year.